Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And this show just happens to land on Tuesday, and it happens to land on the day of the first congressional hearing we've had in 50 years on the UFO topic. I hope you streamed it this morning. Anyone that missed it and would still like to see it, it's actually on my homepage, podcastufo.com, in the show notes for this particular show itself. Tonight, I'm real excited. We have Ralph Blumenthal. He was a co-writer of a piece that announced this in the New York Times last week. And we're going to be talking about the hearing today. And then going to continue talking on the hearing as well with our main guest, Sean Cahill. I'm real excited to have him on. And so this should be a really good show. I hope you enjoy it. And right off the bat, I want to say, I have so many emails since this came out and a lot of emails to return. I will get to that. I will try to answer every email. I thought the hearing was really interesting. First of all, I do just a couple of things I have to get out of the way. This week's blog is a UFO captured by children in Japan. That's by Charles Lear. Again, his book is coming out in a couple of weeks. He'll be on the show. He's been blogging for us for, I think, about 3 years. He may correct me, it may be longer than that, but it's always a pleasure to get his blogs. He's very well researched and his book should be just great. So today at 9 a.m. Eastern, there was a whole bunch of people watching that. I was getting texts from people and all that. It was really exciting. I mean, I had one really close person to me text me and said that it felt like the moon landing, in 1969. It was that impactful. It was an hour and a half. Like I said, there was a lot of things packed in it, but keep in mind for those of you out there who are saying, well, there was really nothing to it and all that, that this is just the beginning. So I think it's very exciting. And I think a lot of important things were talked about. And for that, I'm going to bring in our first guest, the one and only Ralph Blumenthal. Ralph.
Hey, Martin,
welcome.
How you doing? Thank you for having me on.
You bet. And thanks for the article. You alerted everyone. I mean, I'm sure the buzz would have gotten out there, but that article really helped. And that's how I found out about it. People were contacting me. But anyway, so how did you just find out early and just jump on this thing? And because it wasn't too much notice about this.
Well, we had noticed, Leslie Kane, we knew about it for some weeks. We've been tracking this. We were hoping it wouldn't leak. It was our exclusive in the Times. And luckily it held. We were very careful. We didn't do a lot of, noisy reporting around it beforehand. But we did break the story. We knew that this hearing was coming up. We thought it was a big deal. The Times agreed. I mean, it's the first hearing in 54 years when the world was really very different.
Yes.
It's interesting. You could complain that it didn't do this, it didn't do that, but let's focus on what it did do, and we can talk about that. But I thought it was quite interesting.
I did too. And I'm going to start out. I'm going to play, I got a couple of clips, and one is about 1 minute. I'm going to play this because this was, it was Adam Schiff, and it was totally off the cuff. And I like some of the things he said. And this is not about politics. Some people may like him, may not like him. This is about the topic and the way it's being looked at. And here it goes.
I thank you gentlemen for your work, and be very interested to hear what you have to say. To me, among the most fascinating questions are these phenomena that we can measure. That is, instruments report there is something there. It is not the human eye confusing objects in the sky. There is something there, measurable by multiple instruments, and yet it seems to move in directions that are inconsistent with what we know of physics or science more broadly. And that to me poses questions of tremendous interest and as well as potential national security significance. So we look forward to hearing what you're able to report to us today in open session, and I want to thank Chairman Carson again for his extraordinary leadership on this issue, and I yield back.
Yeah, so I thought that was a good sort of an opening. It was right near the beginning. And, just the fact that everything he said there was true, and we've been kind of talking that way for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Martin, the big issue here is how to destigmatize this phenomenon. The last hearings, when they were held 54 years ago, was a very different climate. People lost their jobs for, reporting a sighting. People were ridiculed. It still happens today, but less. So the whole, by putting it out front in a congressional hearing, I think it went quite a ways in taking the sting off the subject and showing that serious people can discuss it in a serious way without ridicule.
That's right. And one of the things is that Moultrie, one of the things, I want to get a couple of the semi-negative things out of the way. And that is someone, and I can't remember, I have it written down in my notes, but someone said right off the bat, they said, is it true that you like science fiction? And so what was that about? I mean, did you,
well,
it's trying to minimize something. Is it?
I mean, it was a light moment. I think in a way it humanized Ronald Moultrie, to show that Undersecretary of Defense was interested in UFO conventions. He didn't dress up, he said.
Yeah.
But
or that much.
That much.
Yeah.
But so I don't think it was nefarious as a way of, taking him down. I think it was a way of humanizing him. Look, everybody knows that the issue has, its humorous side.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay. I like your take on that. Thank you. But it's interesting. And I want to play, if it's all right, I'll get this clip out of the way and be done with the clips, because I think this is fascinating. This is Scott Bray, the Naval Intelligence.
We also spent considerable efforts engaging directly with our naval aviators and building relationships to help destigmatize the act of reporting sightings or encounters. And we worked with naval aviation leadership to provide additional equipment to record any encounter. Navy and Air Force crews now have step-by-step procedures for reporting on a UAP on their knee board in the cockpit and in their post-flight debrief procedures. The direct result of those efforts has been increased reporting, with increased opportunities to focus a number of sensors on any objects. The message is now clear. If you see something, you need to report it. And the message has been received. In fact, recently, I received a call from a senior naval aviator with over 2,000 flight hours. He called me personally from the flight line after landing to talk about an encounter that he had just experienced. Those were just the initial steps. We also made a concerted effort to assemble subject matter experts from across the Department of Defense and the intelligence community and other U.S. government agencies and departments. We forged partnerships with the research, development, and acquisition communities, with industry partners, and with academic research labs, and we brought many allies and international partners into our discussions on UAP. Additionally, subject matter experts from a wide variety of fields, including physics, optics, metallurgy, meteorology, just to name a few, have been brought in to expand our understanding in areas where we may not have organic expertise. In short, we've endeavored to bring an all-hands-on-deck approach to better understand this phenomena. So what have we learned so far? Any given observation may be fleeting or longer. It may be recorded or not. It may be observable by one or multiple assets. In short, there's rarely an easy answer. For example,
and he went on to say that there's been over 400 reports since, it sounded like he was saying, since they tried to destigmatize the situation. I don't know if you caught that, but it seems like there's more comfort in reporting. And I love the fact that this is going to be on their knee board, specifics on what to do with a UFO encounter and in the briefing. That's all good. That's all in the positive direction. But one thing I did catch there, and I know you caught it because we talked off mic, was one of the experts they're calling in is someone in metallurgy. And what does that mean? Because they said that there's nothing that can't be explained. In other words, there's no crashed UFO. I think they more or less said that in a matter of words. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, he did say they don't have any debris. He does. I mean, I don't know what little, room he left, for he doesn't have it, maybe somebody else has it. But I came away with the idea that the government does not have, according to him, materials from a crashed UFO. But then what is the metallurgy part of it? I mean, what metals have been retrieved? What metals are being looked at? Where are they from? I suppose you could theorize, what kind of metallic substance one of these physical objects, which they agreed were physical, might consist of. But it was quite a curious, dissonance. We don't have material, but we are looking at the metallurgy. So, among the many mysteries of this subject.
Right. And there was another thing he said later on. I'm not sure if you caught this either, or if it means anything, but he was saying what is to remain classified is if they find out anything about these objects that they may not want their adversaries to know. And that you could kind of go off, into a conspiracy a little bit. And what is he saying? Like, if they find out they're actually, from another planet, they're going to keep it from our adversaries, which would mean that they would have to keep it from us as well.
Right. He invoked that at one point when they talked about underwater sightings.
Yes.
So it would be very nice to know what came up at the classified hearing. We're not supposed to know that. But, how much of that really can and should be kept away from the American people. I suppose if it has a defense component, security component, it should remain classified. But the whole history of this subject is that a lot of material that could have been shared with the American people wasn't, for all kinds of reasons. So, but that was very intriguing, the underwater thing. He invoked the classified, shield at that point.
Do you think, now we only have a couple minutes here, because I know you have a hard 15 minutes. You're very busy. You're in high demand right now. So what was your biggest takeaway from this? Was it just that, or do you have something else?
No, I mean, Scott Bray said these objects, he said it clearly again, these objects are physical. They are real. And I can't emphasize that enough. That came out in the UAP task force report of last year after they went through all the other possibilities, cloud formation, natural phenomena, reflections, other aviation, earthbound aviation. And then there was the big other bucket. But they said in conjunction with that these objects, many of them are real. So we've come a long way since the last hearing, Martin, 54 years ago when they said, swamp gas and all these other outlandish explanations. So now we're coming around to the idea we don't know what they are. We don't know where they're from. We don't know how they can do what they can do, but they're real. Now that to me is quite an admission.
It is. And, someone asked me what's the number one thing I've learned while doing this show for over 10 years. And that was my answer. That they're real. I'm not saying what they are. And I believe somewhere in the talk this morning, in the hearing, someone was talking about the very strong possibility that some of these could be extraterrestrial. It's a possibility, and that there's a lot of research on that possibility of it, which I thought was pretty good.
And clearly, what came out of the hearing, that these things are able to do aerodynamically what we can't duplicate, what our earthly adversaries can't duplicate. Again, he threw cold water on the idea that they could be Russian or Chinese, which is trotted out periodically. He said the Chinese are doing their own research. They have their own UAP task force equivalent. So that's interesting. So they're looking into the same things we are. So it is interesting when you go back, line by line over the testimony. There were quite some insights here.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ralph. I really appreciate it. Always nice to talk to you.
Likewise.
And you know what? I'm going to run this thing about your book right now. Here it goes.
The Believer is the chilling true story of Dr. John Mack, a renowned Harvard psychiatrist and Pulitzer Prize winner.
This is an outreach program from the cosmos to the consciously impaired.
He risked it all to investigate human encounters with aliens. The Believer, Alien Encounters, Hard Science, and the Passion of John Mack. Written by award-winning former New York Times journalist and author Ralph Blumenthal. Now available in paperback from High Road Books.
All right. Wow. And that book is linked below. Sean, how are
Hello,
you?
Martin.
I'm really glad that you agreed to be on this show. And it was funny when you were visiting with Lou Elizondo. You two were going to be on together, and your flight, you forgot to check your flight, was leaving that day. So
Yeah, we
that
got our
didn't work
dates
out.
wrong.
Yeah. So
Glad to finally be here.
yes, I'm glad you are too. And so before we go into, well, actually, let's quickly say your background first of all, and then I want to talk about what you thought about the hearing today. But
Sure.
if you throw your background out there, I think it's pretty interesting. I know you were in a rock band at one time, right? Weren't you?
Been in a couple throughout the years. Nothing notable. Just
Yeah.
a hobby of mine. But I spent 20 years in the United States Navy. Most of that time as a Master at Arms, and more than half of it as a Chief Master at Arms. In 2004, I was stationed on board the USS Princeton when we encountered what's now infamously known as the Tic-Tac. Over the course of that week, I assisted Kevin Day and Gary Voorhees and some other people with ship's movements. And I was also on the bridge where I may or may have not witnessed 5 to 7 anomalous lights in the sky that may have been associated with the Tic-Tac. We'll never know. But that's where I started with this. And it was about 9 or so years later when I met Luis Elizondo, when I let him know that I was one of the folks that I was there, and we struck up a friendship. And I've been working on this subject with him ever since.
Yeah. And I listened to another interview you were on, and I want to talk to you about some of the things you said then. But for right now, did you stream did you get to watch? You did. And I know it was very early. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, your time. So, but anyway, you can replay it. I don't know. So you got to watch it. What was your thoughts on that hearing?
Overall, if I were to give it a grade, I'd give it a definite A minus. I think we really achieved something today. I think that a lot of people should not let that pass them by. Now we could get into expectation management and we could get into the minutia of the pluses and minuses of it. But overall, today was a historic day. We should be celebrating these first steps.
I agree with you. I've had some email, from people that listen to the show that were disappointed. And I remember speaking about this. I believe I spoke about it last week, saying basically, look, if you are expecting them to talk about aliens or crashed UFO material, it is all about expectations.
Mm-hmm.
What you're expecting to hear and what actually happens. But I personally think it was a really big step. And I think that, it's an exciting time to be looking at this topic. I mean, for the first many years, it was still very interesting to me. But the last few years, it's like a snowball rolling down the hill. And, there's a lot of people to thank for that. People who have, done a lot of work to make this happen.
We really can't thank enough of them. I recently put out an article thanking folks that we worked with directly at Skyfort. And I was very surprised at the amount of correspondence I got from other people saying, well, you didn't mention this person and all of these pioneers. And I would have been in front of my computer for a week listing all of the people that wrote books and papers and folks like John Mack that we relied on for the long-term research value that they've provided. But it's a boundless amount of people that got us here today. It wasn't just Skyfort. It wasn't just Lou Elizondo and the handful of people that we may associate with. It was folks like yourself and Mr. Blumenthal and Leslie Keene and many other people who took something from before and looked at it differently and elevated it to a place that we had public hearings in Congress today. So it took all of us, every single one of us, I think.
That's right. Yeah. And, there was one point that I just are remembering right now where they talked about the disinformation aspect of this and how, they have to be really wary of that. And that's why I'm hoping that they have, it seems to me, well, this is just my opinion and this is just off the cuff, but it seems to me like if someone just dives into this thing, like they've never really followed it closely and they just dive in. And I know someone in particular that I can tell you right now that's very highly thought of, that's done a lot of things and been on TV programs and stuff like that, and is doing a wonderful job. But when he first dove into this thing, he was going to make a big mistake. And luckily, I stopped the situation just by a conversation on the phone, and after I looked at what he was talking about and all that type of thing. So this is what I'm talking about that can happen if someone is in this task force, if they don't have like say a person that really knows this subject, they can make a lot of mistakes and they can follow a lot of leads that are going to go nowhere and make fools of themselves. You know, there's plenty of opportunity to do that.
I have to say that I feel like that is one thing that the task force got right. While I would agree with a lot of people, without being condescending, that the task force needs some help in education surrounding the greater zeitgeist of the subject. At the same time, I'm very happy that they didn't go down any rabbit holes of fictionalized misinfo, disinfo, things that are just that get confusing. They started at the ground level, and I know a lot of people wanted more impactful disclosure type questions being asked today. But I'm very glad that they brought dignity to the subject, because we're almost starting at square one in a lot of ways, because we're just not sure what came before this moment was worthwhile and what wasn't.
Yeah, and one thing I have to say about one of the representatives, his name was Gallagher. He asked some really good questions about the nukes and the disabling of the nukes, and he was rather surprised that no one seemed to know about that. And you know, that was through the Air Force, and there should be all types of documentation for that. And so I thought that was really good that he did that, and maybe they will look into it. But I have to say, and I'm probably going to get some mail for saying this, he went into the Wilson document. Now, the Wilson document we don't know if it's that whole thing, if it's really that credible. There's some issues with it. And then he entered it, you know, and I'm thinking the whole time, I'm cringing, thinking, oh, he was doing so well. and then he went there, and that could potentially muddy the water, so to speak, and that could be a problem, in my opinion. So
if the task force, as a generalized term, meaning what goes forward from here on out, the authoritative oversight that we're all hoping for, if they do their homework right, we're going to get the truth out of the Wilson document. So whether it's of dubious origin or whether it's laced with urban myth and legend, that's something that's now in the task force's hands. Now, I don't want to spend too much time going, why had they never heard of the Wilson document? It should have been something that one way or the other they would have been socialized to. There were some other things during the hearing that I found a little interesting. That a lot was made of Project Blue Book, but it was almost completely unmentioned. They didn't mention Project Sign, Project Grudge,
right.
The Condon Report.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of people watching this that are hearing the task force answer questions. For example, like what you mentioned earlier, do you have crash material? They said, we do not have crash material. I wouldn't be surprised if the UAP task force doesn't even have a water cooler. No offense to them, but it's only a few people that are trying to reach out into a network of larger folks and gain information. So they were woefully uneducated in a lot of what the key points might be. And so I think that you mentioning that they're going to need a PhD level UFO expert advising them. And they're going to need folks like Lou Elizondo or people like him, and the pilots, et cetera. We all saw what was missing today. So I think a lot of the American public, especially centered in the UFO and science communities, know exactly what they're going to be looking for next time, for sure.
Does anyone? I haven't heard this in any type of way, but does anyone know if this is going to be a regular type of? I meant to ask Ralph this. You know, if these hearings are going to be on a regular basis.
I don't have a solid standard operating procedure or memo or anything to point to, but when we speak about it, and I didn't have as much notice as Mr. Blumenthal did, certainly. but I knew about it a little bit ahead of time. The idea is that the classified briefings that occur should have unclassified public brethren that follow them, and that if our congressional folks are getting briefings at this point moving forward on this, then whatever they're briefed on should be sanitized and redacted down to the level where it can be publicized as quickly as possible. So if we see consistently classified briefings behind closed doors, that's going to get old pretty quick, I think.
Right. And what did you think, if you were listening when I said to Ralph that if they are, working to understand what these UAP are, that they want to make sure they're not going to share it with their adversaries, which would mean obviously that they can't share it with the public. Am I taking that? Do you think I'm taking that in a wrong way? Or do you think, does that mean that it could be something military? Is that what, do you think they meant, that type of thing?
Well, I think where a lot of people have a kind of bias that takes them one way or the other is when we get to what is it. So if it's adversarial, if it won't show itself and unveil itself, and if it won't disclose itself, then our military, our leaders, they have to treat it as such. Now, I don't think what they were talking about, because again, we didn't talk about aliens today. That wasn't on the table. Extraterrestrials and ideas like that, those conclusions are very far down the road from we have an anomalous video and radar data and things like that. However, before people get too up in arms about that, I think that what we're talking about here solely surrounds concepts, technology, and things surrounding national security, in that if there is an other that possesses advanced technology that might dominate a battle space, if the United States government had information that pointed towards that as an outside influence, I can see where they would want to keep that from our earthly adversaries, because you can easily make the jump to your adversary might contact this thing, gain the upper hand on you, etc. So I think a lot of people don't understand this isn't just about figuring out what it is. It's also about safeguarding ourselves from our earthly adversaries and the possibility of adversaries off planet, or more esoteric if that's what it turns out to be. And because it hasn't identified itself, and the government has a role in that, and part of that role is managing intelligence, managing capabilities to ensure that an adversary doesn't leap past us.
The one thing that I think about that is, if there was all of a sudden there was knowledge that yes, this is definitely an intelligence from, an extraterrestrial intelligence, we have figured this out. I'm not really sure. I see where you're going, but I also wonder what they would be giving up if they admitted that, if they knew it, would they? Yeah. I mean,
no, it's a very
tricky.
sticky situation, because we're very much in the dark here. Yeah. The implications and conclusions are astounding. I think that our leadership, if those implications and conclusions exist, even in the most general form, I think they're probably very frightened. A lot of people will blow off to me when I talk to them about the sociological and cultural impacts of these things. But a lot of the people I talk to about this subject aren't playing chess with the subject. They're playing checkers, and they're just thinking about their visceral wants and needs and the needs of the public. And they're not thinking about the cascading effects that these are going to have throughout our society once they're known. I'm not a secret keeper. I want to know. And when I know, I'm going to say, but I can see where people would be reticent to make those decisions. And I can see that this is going to be a hard fight.
I've said a number of times on the show, and you just have never heard me say it. But I've often thought and said that I don't think that our government really knows that much more about what they are than anyone, and if they did, they would have an awful lot of explaining to do if they've known about it for a long time and have, said it's really nothing going on here, type of thing. but I really believe that they probably don't know that much about it, but I do believe that there is some really good evidence out there. There's been a number of reports over the years of film that was taken by the government. In the situation we've been talking about, Gary Voorhees talks about the data bricks being, absconded right off of
Right.
the Nimitz. So they have to know more, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they really know what it is.
I completely agree with you, and that flabbergasts a lot of people. But I think what we saw today with the hearing shows us that there's not a Library of Congress to go to find out what has been done in this subject. You have to go to ufology. You have to go outside of government and leadership to get a sight picture of what's happening here. And we even saw a task force that was specifically tasked with gaining as much information as they could in a very protracted period of time. But they were woefully uneducated about what's gone on before, about who their predecessors are, and what kind of things have been worked on over the years. And we have 75 years of at least observational reverse engineering, of considering ideas, of seeing things and talking about them at a certain level. And these ideas do promulgate. So none of these things are absolutely a new subject to any of these folks. But I think that the learning curve is going to be very steep going from here on out.
One of the things, I believe they actually mentioned it today, I've heard it before, but they're not really going to, and in the chat room, I just have to say in the chat room, I may not get to too many of your questions tonight. I will try, but if you'd like to send a question, please do put them in all caps, and I'll try to get to them if I can. But, they are not going to be looking back further really than 2000 or so. And their answer and it's really a shame because so much has happened over the years and decades. But their reasoning is that the data collection is not near good enough to understand what these things are. Well, that's what they've said.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I may,
yes.
Let's raise the BS flag a little bit here, because I don't want people to think that I'm an apologist for what we saw today. Okay, I think that what we saw was folks doing the best that they could with the time they were possibly given. But Representative Tim Burchett immediately following, and I've seen this via an NBC clip from Gadi Schwartz, but he came right out and said, "Come on, we've seen better behind closed doors. The pilots have seen better. We have better. We need the pilots up here, and we need to be showing the people, the more compelling evidence." And I have to completely agree with him. And the idea that he would kind of do a 180 on the status quo that we had seen go on before is very shocking to me. But I'm happy about it, because it means that there are mavericks willing to push this forward and not let it go away. Yes,
I saw, and I wish I could bring it up quickly, but I saw someone sent me a news clip that was great, and this and I can't remember if it was a senator or it was someone that was important enough to have his hands in on this topic. Maybe, I don't think he was on the task force, but possible he was, and he was basically saying, "Come on, these things are, come on, everybody, these things are real." And I wish I could find the clip easy enough. I would probably put it up, but he was like saying, we really need to, stop. I believe he called it a cover-up. It's been a cover-up. Now, you can say it's a cover-up, or again, it might just go back to the fact that they have no idea what's going on.
I think that, again, without being an apologist, because there have been cover-ups. Lies of omission are part of cover-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Some could even say that the lack of understanding of the playing field today by some of the people could be perceived as a cover-up. But the compartmentalization and continued recompartmentalization of this subject is astounding. If we look at all of the different programs that proceeded from following World War II, from Blue Book on, you see that there is a constant eureka moment for new generations, and every few years you get a group of people to go, oh my God, there's something here. Let's form a task force of some kind, or a group or a project and put it together and research it. And then at the end of it, we get a very milquetoast and whitewashed report and a nothing to see here, and it goes back into the black. And that happened over and over again for 75 years. So the notion of a cover-up doesn't have to fall into the conspiracy realm. It can be a cover-up by default. It could be a cover-up because of all of the compartmentalization. But the fact is we're here. The oversight that we're seeing now cannot go away. There needs to be a decompartmentalization and a homogenization of this subject.
Absolutely. Well, like I asked Ralph this question, I'll ask you, what was today, what was your biggest takeaway from, the best thing you would think that came out of today?
Well, for me, we got to really knock down a lot of the low-hanging fruit that has been plaguing us lately. ATIP is now a matter of record without question. The Wilson memo has been assumed into the machine, so we'll finally get the investigation that it deserves, and we'll finally start to understand that. I think that we all saw obfuscation in place today. I think Congress is up for the task, but we saw this taken seriously and given dignity in a way that it hasn't been before. Those things are on record. We have the follow-on scheduling for these briefings, and there are unclassed briefings coming up again too. And there's no reason why we shouldn't get the data out of those unclassed briefings. The question is where is Air Force? They should be taking a lead in this. Today it was discussed that pardon me, discussed again that Navy has lead on this. Where is Air Force in this? And are we going to see the military leadership now that's in place and that bring in their pilots, bring in their field operators and the other people that have seen these things? Just recently, there's talk of a group of folks that were in Saudi Arabia on combat missions that were specifically ordered not to speak about the UAP they encountered while on these missions. That's a big question as to why. Those folks can immediately be brought in. People like Commander Fravor, if they're willing to speak more. And the other pilots should immediately be brought in so we can, if we're not going to go back through 70 years worth of data and figure out what that meant, then let's take the data that we have right now in 4K in some cases, and let's figure out what that data is.
One of the things regarding, you're talking about the 70 years that they had, and I wish that was brought up more today. And the reason why is because there was a lot of question whether these things could be, say, secret programs or possible adversaries. But they never, I want to say they don't talk about, hey, back in 1960, this object was doing exactly the same thing. So how would you explain that to be, our adversaries or a secret program? I mean, that would have been really nice if that was part of the topic today, because it discounts so much if they do not bring that up. I mean, you could relatively say about anything that Tic-Tac could have been, technology. And one of the things I'm rambling a little bit here, but one of the things I did like, I can't remember, it was Moultrie perhaps said there is no blue on blue. In other words, we're not chasing our own tail. We're not chasing the technology of a secret program, that type of thing, which I thought was interesting to hear and good to hear.
In general, I've never worried too much about us bumping into our own tech. I came from a period in the Navy where we had experienced a scandal. We experienced a lot of scandals before I came in the Navy. We experienced Tailhook, and we experienced another one with our training forces. We had what were called Red Cell. We had special operations guys who would come in and test the defenses of our own assets. And after a while, people started getting hurt. And we realized that blue on blue, unannounced training leads to mishap and death, and it wasn't worth it. And so the US Navy completely stopped all blue on blue unannounced training. And for the remainder of my career, we would go to great lengths to ensure that every person with insider hearing understood whether or not we were engaged in a drill or an actual event. So the idea that we would test this technology out there amongst a nuclear battle fleet that's prepping to go to actual operations, I think is beyond the realm of ridiculousness, because there's just too many things that could go wrong if there were a mishap. So I don't see that as happening.
I think that's pardon me. I think that's very important for people to know that this is not it. You know, people like Mick West, who, you know, has come up with that type of thing. Actually, I take that back. I'm not 100% sure if that's one of the ways that he went, but other people have talked about the fact that they think it's, and there was someone that was saying it was a hologram type of situation that was being tested and all these type of things. But it's really good to know that the Navy learned their lesson a long time ago and this would not happen. And I would assume that would be across all branches of the military.
That's correct. We do not do unannounced training exercises against armed, locked and loaded forces. I'm trying to imagine the mishap that could have happened with a 5 observables craft and a nuclear aircraft carrier with a fleet of aircraft and guided missiles in submarines and on ships. I have no idea how badly that could have gone if that were a training exercise. We have a solid history of observational data that says this is not a brand new modern problem. It's a 70-year investigation for a reason. I think that we have to take some of these benchmarks, that it's a 75-year plus investigation, that numerous authorities throughout the years have investigated it and then literally said the same thing. Nothing to see here. We'll be over there. Don't call us. We'll call you. But if I can remind folks, this is something not a lot of people are gonna be aware of. Just let me pull up my notes for a minute. In December of 1953, the Joint Chiefs of Staff issued a letter of promulgation. Joint Army-Navy Air Force Regulation number 146 made it a crime for military personnel to discuss classified UFO reports with unauthorized persons. Violators face up to 2 years in prison and/or fines up to $10,000. And again, that was December 1953, Joint Army-Navy Staff letter of promulgation number 146. Now, my question is in any realm, why would we need to make it illegal to discuss this? Now, I understand no one needs to be reminded not to discuss classified reports. Why does everyone in the service need a reminder not to discuss classified UFO reports at that time? It certainly tells us that this isn't new. If we needed to order sailors for under a $10,000 penalty back in the 60s, that's a big penalty in the 1960s.
Oh my God, it's like a house today.
So
buying a house.
What were we saving ourselves from if Seaman Timmy blabbed about the flying saucer he saw while out to sea?
Yeah.
And I'm being flippant, but those are questions I'd like to see answered too. If we have a chance, some of the history of this should bring up some very, very big questions for our leadership.
Since you've really looked into this deeply, and I do want to, there's a number of things I want to ask, and more or less in the second hour, we'll go into those type of things. But have you looked at all into what they call the USOs, you know, underwater? Yes. Because that fascinates me, and you being a Navy guy, I would think that would kind of be an interest of yours, possibly.
Well, I can tell you firsthand, now granted it's hearsay, but off the record, the sonar techs that I was with on Princeton, they're not interested in being identified. I've spoken to a couple of them, and if they want to come forward, they know how easily they could. But they said, Sean, they were all over the place under the water. They were zipping back and forth like crazy. And that prompted me to make calls to some folks that I knew that were in ballistic missile submarines during the 60s and 70s up around the Arctic Circle and the Dew Line. And they told me the same thing. And they said that there was a culture on the boat to not make those log entries. that they just happened and you just let it happen.
That's
I'd really like to know why.
That is quite amazing. Now, Mark D'Antonio, who was he's an astronomer. He was on my show last week. I've been friends with him for a number of years. He worked for the as a contractor, did a project for the Navy, and he got a submarine ride on a maiden voyage or whatever they call it. And there was a what they called a fast walker situation where something was going 200 knots underwater. And the kind of the same thing. I don't know if it was logged or not, but that was, here he is, a civilian, and he's right in there in the mix of it. And here's the whole thing happening, which I think is extraordinary. And, you know, he just happens to be on there when that happens, which makes me totally believe what these people are telling you, that it happens all the time.
And it's very intriguing because in the medium of water, we have our own, you have your own benchmarks for speed like we do in the atmosphere. You know, when an aircraft hits a supersonic envelope, there's action that happens. And when you get to a certain speed underneath water, you have what's called cavitation. Right. And these things are not cavitating.
Just like there's no sound barrier breaking.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's not our tech. I mean, I'll say that in the blanket way. It's easy for me to say because nobody can prove me wrong right now, but I don't think that's our tech. That's what we covet at the end of the rainbow for any of this stuff. We want to go that far, that fast, that smooth. We can't.
How, I wonder, there's probably a algorithm for how this works, or a rule of thumb, or in physics, about how fast something can go underwater before cavitation occurs. And does that have to do with propulsion or just the speed of it?
I'm not an expert on this, but I will say what I do know about our submarine fleet is that there are designs that we can, there are ways to design a submarine, ways to design torpedoes, so that they can, like we have super cavitating torpedoes that go very, very, very fast. Those are classified in their nomenclature, but you can reduce cavitation. So a submarine, you don't want to advertise that noise. So they do certain things to the design and the way that the screws work and the way that it moves that reduce cavitation. But I don't have the I don't have the information to say whether it would be due to propulsion or not. I understand what you're saying. Is it an effect of an esoteric technology that's bypassing what we're doing, or is it an effect of structure or speed? There's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of there's a whole lot of questions when it comes to USOs in general. Like, what are they doing under there if they're there? And the Earth is, I think, 73% ocean. It's really high. So that's such a large part of our surface, and these things could certainly hide under there. But why? And what would they be doing there? And at what end are they?
For me, Occam's razor says because we're not there. If you take a look at Google shipping lanes and aircraft travel lanes, and you will find that all of us travel around the globe on a few different lines, and that there are giant swaths of ocean where no one ever goes to.
No, you don't want to be there in a shipwreck either.
No, then
in a raft.
We don't fight. We're not fighting naval battles in the middle of the Pacific with anyone. Our ships are going from place to place, and our goods and services and cruises and everything. You might have an oceanographic explorer that's in an interesting area placing NOAA buoys or something like that. But there are swaths the size of Texas where there's not a human being in right now.
Yeah. So there's just so much. It's so vast, But another thing is, I'm thinking like a human, okay? So I wouldn't want to stay under the water. What is it there? If it's a structured object under the water with, let's say, some type of being in it, maybe not a being, maybe it's a drone type of situation, where it would be from would still be very interesting. But I just wouldn't, you think about, you go down so many hundreds of feet and it's totally black down there, so it's kind of like, why would you want to live on Venus if you could?
We live everywhere that we can on this planet. So
Yeah.
you're wearing a spacesuit right now, and so am I. This was so you could leave, this is so you can leave the house and not get too cold. I've got
Or
a
arrested.
slightly thicker, well, yeah. I've got some thicker spacesuits hanging up over there, and some helmets and things like that. I'm being cute here, but everything that we do, every tool that we have that isn't a part of this body, is a means to get farther away from our base camp and gain more resources. So if you have in my mind, if you have a technology that is able to exhibit the 5 observables, to me, there's a lot of follow-on conclusions from that as to what you could accomplish. And it seems like you're taking your here with you wherever you go. So just like we're happy to be in the rain with an umbrella, they may have no problem due to the level of technology they have being comfortable wherever they like.
So, all right. So again, thinking in human terms, which probably may not make any sense at all for whatever they are. But what would you be doing under the water? Would you be exploring the life that's there, non-intelligent life, except for octopuses and dolphins and some whales and things like that? But I mean, kind of a lower, intelligence. It seems like you'd be, I just wonder if they're there all the time, what is, why? And this is all speculation. I'm just,
and I'm happy to speculate with you. To me, they're avoiding us when it's not advantageous, when it's advantageous for them to do so. They're not. This is the thing for me, and it, because I face a lot of very light anti-military and anti-government venom from friends, colleagues, and families, people who want a chance to rant at the machine and point at somebody for 5 minutes while they do it. And I go, when they're done, I go, okay, are you done? Because that wasn't me. And you know what I mean? I don't mean to digress too much, but they're avoiding us. They're not landing on the White House lawn. They're not landing at the Super Bowl, at least not yet. There's not a big light show in the sky over New York that 2 million people saw. You know what I mean? When we have flaps, they don't seem to work like that. They can let us know who they are anytime they want to.
Right.
And we could have embassies and spaceports and all that cool, neat stuff like in the movies that we all imagine, but it seems like these things are shooting in and out of the ocean and coming in from space. So again, I'm not painting a picture of invasion. Okay, that's not a word that I would use. But if you have an external source that is coming here, the first thing that they're going to do is the same things we're going to do if we were in the same situation. You're going to send covert intelligence, military, and scientists. There are going to be people there to protect the civilians and the scientists. But in general, you're going into hostile, unknown territory. And if a lot of people speculate, if they showed up after our first detonations of nuclear devices or us first splitting the atom, I imagine they would be pretty wary of us.
Yes.
We're in the middle of a world war. We're in the middle of a practical race war right now. We're so polarized right now. It's ridiculous. And I think folks need a more realistic view of who we are, what's going on, et cetera, when they apply it to this subject. It's not just as simple as the government knows and won't tell us. How about the UFOs know and they won't tell us? So, yeah.
It's all fascinating. And, I wonder if this is going to sound really silly, but I wonder if any of whoever it is out there that's visiting us knew that we had this hearing today.
Sure.
Or are we not that important? Are we like the ants and the anthill?
I'm at the risk of sounding like Mr. Moultrie today. I am also a science fiction fan. And I'm really enjoying the newest iteration of Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. And pardon me, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, because I'm gonna I'm going to spoil the generalized plot of the first episode, which is a reverse Roswell situation. Essentially, they go to a planet that's roughly similar to us, and the Enterprise is the UFO. And I think we've all seen that in the old program before, but they did a modern spin on it. It's something that I think a lot of people should take a look at, because we're seeing in that episode what is our most hoped for best case scenario in a lot of people's hearts, that one day this large unmistakable ship is going to appear somewhere, and we're all just going to wake up from our nonsense and go, oh, you're right, it's a bigger universe, we should stop fighting and everything else. I would love for that to happen. If someone can show me where the switch is to flip for that, I'll do it in a minute.
Yeah.
But that hasn't happened in the last 70 years. And I don't know of any plans for that to happen either. So again, we're left holding the bag here, and government looks bad because they've been looking at it for longer than they're talking about it, but there's nobody to point to take responsibility.
That's right. And it's generational. The people that were there in 1947 are, they're long since passed, and generation after generation, they pass the baton or pass the information or whatever, compartmentalized somehow. If that's how it's done, if there's files somewhere, the Roswell file box, tucked away somewhere. It's all interesting, and it would be really, if only we could know what they know. That's can't all be classified. It just seems like there would be more that they could share, that they have learned over the years, that wouldn't shake our society.
Mm-hmm. And I completely agree with you that information should exist. It has to. And we're back to the who's the they we're going to point at. Now we're going to point at the UAP task force, and we're going to point at the folks that were in the room in the congressional hearing. But it's really, unless we're going to point at an edifice like Air Force, which I thought we just did with the task force, where are their submissions? Where's the forklifts full of data they've collected?
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that topic up, because that has been really curious, that the Navy has been the one to take the lead on this. And I did hear Scott Bray say today that these the information, the protocols are going to be on the knee board in the cockpit, and he said Navy and Air Force. He did say Air Force as well. So, but it's not them taking the lead, and that is a very strange situation, because they have, they were a Project Blue Book for one, and why? I wonder why.
As of right now, perhaps not anymore. I could be overstepping here, but as of the formation of Space Force, U.S. Air Force had tactical and strategic control over our airspace and lower Earth orbit for the United States, unrivaled by any other nation. It makes no sense that our maritime force would be running this. Now, granted, they have a very substantial air force of their own, and high tech and satellites, and our ships are of some of the and aircraft are some of the highest tech that we have. But that would seem like a real blow to me as an Air Force leader, to have a aerospace mission taken from me and given to our maritime force. Now, I'm Navy. I'm happy about it. I'm proud that I don't know why that's dumb, but I'm proud the Navy's running it. But yeah, where is Air Force? They're not even in the room.
Yes. Yeah. And, one thing you said, I heard you say just a few minutes ago, like if you could flip the switch of, them presenting themselves, maybe we would stop the fighting, because it is kind of ridiculous. It's kind of like Ronald Reagan said several times, right. If we were presented with that, we would all come together as one. It's a nice fantasy to think that, but it also makes me think of, okay, this hearing happened today. Why can't it be more of a worldwide situation? I mean, because there's so much data that could be passed back and forth through every country. Brazil's very open mind to it. France is, a few others, even China has an interest in it. But it just seems like this is not this is not, shouldn't be confined to a country. It's something that involves our whole entire planet. You know, I can understand that if they totally think it's an adversary, but they have to have enough data to show that it's, you know, it's outside of that. Most of it has to be outside of that, especially when their objects are displaying technology that defies physics and science. So
yeah, I think that we have a long way to go in driving this data. It's almost like we're herding this disparate group of cows into a bottleneck. But there's so much information out there, and so many assumptions that are made across the board on all of our accounts, for you, for me, for experts, for fans alike. And nobody has stepped up yet. And I see frustration on the faces of our representatives. Some of them are downright angry, frankly. But the question remains: how long will it take us to get where we're supposed to be? And will our leadership and will the people in government that are doing this work for us right now, do they feel a responsibility to help shepherd us into understanding? Or do they just feel that they need to make data dumps to the American public and walk away? Because this is not a simple subject. It has been tainted with misinfo and disinfo over the years, and people should define what those things mean for themselves. They're very different things. But the ufology community itself for years has been targeted by Russian disinfo. They really enjoy putting conspiracy and hyperbole and things like that into the American zeitgeist to confuse American folks. People should not be surprised about that. So examining our I would actually say our national and international confirmation bias, as to what we expect, what we can deliver, and then truly asking the really hard questions at the risk of upsetting some friends. I had the opportunity today on a BBC interview to ask the question: why are our Five Eyes partners in Great Britain not on the same page with us as to the reality of this situation? We're sharing intelligence. We share, you know, military data and intelligence data across the board because of our partnerships. And yet the MOD still says nothing to see here. We don't think this is an important subject, while the United States is holding open hearings. So folks in the UK and in the Ministry of Defense need to ask themselves, why aren't we on the same page? Why aren't you stepping up where we are and helping us out?
Well, you know, that may be this may be a domino situation. You know, perhaps we'll see how this is received. What I'm hoping doesn't happen is that this is an ephemeral thing, and like everyone, like, okay, move along. What's next? You know, of course, with all the crazy news going on constantly, this is going to be a blip to the average person, probably. I don't know how much this is going to be covered in the news. Hopefully, a lot. So let's hope that it's not just something that is talked about a little bit and then no one really cares. To me, it's kind of like, I feel like my friend today that texted me, it's almost like the moon landing. It's a big deal. I think it is.
I don't think it's going to go away. Like Ralph, I'm privy to a few things a little bit ahead of when they come out, because I work on the end where we try to make some of these things happen. A lot of the things, as we say, behind the scenes, I know people are tired of hearing that, but a lot of the things happening behind the scenes are getting real traction, getting real support. This has spread out much far beyond where I think a lot of people understand. Where it's being talked about is almost everywhere in leadership and influence at this point. Word has made its way around. Now it's time for the people, those thought leaders, those influencers, for lack of a better word, and even to a certain extent, even some of our celebrities and other folks, it's time for them to add dignity to this the way that the hearings on the Hill did, because that's how we communicate to each other. We communicate via our media, and we have people in our country that we allow to do our talking for us, not necessarily our thinking, but a lot of our talking. And then we kind of line up with who we agree with, and we reshuffle the deck. But this is really spread out very, very far. So I would expect, while you're going to see a great deal going on in the private sector and in industry with people trying to find ways to capitalize on new paradigms, new technology, new ideas, and things like that, you're also seeing people that are thought leaders, academics, researchers who weren't turned on to the reality of this, turning their acumen towards it. So I think we're going to see a huge explosion in understanding, because I think we're gonna get a lot more experts helping us to weed out some of the nonsense, and I think we're gonna come up with new questions. But I don't think it's gonna go away. It would be a very bad optic for the U.S. government to have come this far and to have allowed this to become as popular a subject as it is right now, and then think that they're going to be able to turn out the lights and sneak away without telling anybody anything.
Excellent point. Excellent point. I agree. And so I do think it's moving forward. And one of the things I really liked that Scott Bray had to say was that all of the different areas of expertise that he's getting involved in this, hundreds of scientists. When you hear that, I remember when I started the show, that was something I brought up a lot. Why doesn't science get involved in this? Oh, because they can't get funding, or because it's taboo. It's a career killer. And all that is going away. I don't know about the funding. The issue with funding for most scientists is that it has to be something solvable, something that has an end, that they can work toward, which this, we may never know, in another 50 years, we still may not really know, but at least it could be explored, and, hints and clues of what actually may be going on. I mean, I hope that it's discovered exactly what's going on, but that's all I have is hope. I really don't know. We may, it's not an easy thing to capture, whatever it is.
We live in a very interesting and dynamic universe, and we for the sake of conversation, we often default to the idea of what other people call aliens, and aliens being either a non-human or an off-world species, or something that came here in a spaceship of some kind. But without getting too cheeky, using the Marvel movies as a reference, which most of us have seen them now. The Marvel movies speak of a universe, they talk about a universe that's multifaceted. And physics shows us that we live in a multifaceted universe, even if we're only focused on one facet at a time. So if we were to find out that we were bumping into some aspect of the multiverse, or seeing echoes of another Earth, or something like that, and again, wild speculation, it would be a very different thing than an alien with a name in a vehicle making a trip from one rock to another in a vast universe. And it might be something that continues forever without us ever understanding it. And so that side of the coin is kind of the other end of, there's something weird going on, but it's not exactly what you think. Those are possibilities we have to take into account. And so that's going to require just so much more science, because what we're talking about here is really just observation. We're gonna sit here on our rock and look at the universe with as much ability as we can and try to gather information. That has to be applied to this now, completely across the board, full spectrum.
Right. And I wonder if, let's say a person has a fear, or they say that groups of religion or whatever have a fear of that there's, like if they found out aliens were visiting us from another rock, as you say, that, oh my, what does this mean? And, oh God, it's terrible. And, all this type of thing. They could absolutely have the same type of fear if it was from another dimension or another multiverse. I mean, it's still, like you said, alien to us, and it would still be very hard to understand and explain. And
what's the difference between a demon per a religious definition and an extra dimensional animal that wants to take your resources and exploit you. I see semantics here. You know what I mean? So, and there are people that think that that's partially, if not wholly, what we're dealing with. And I think again, we're back to that unity aspect of this, because this is not a national subject. This is not a partisan subject. It's not a regional or a continental subject. It is a global subject. This is going to affect all of us. And unless I'm wildly wrong, I don't think it's owned by any one specific religion, because I think it's pretty obvious to me that all of our religions are again, trying to view something from their own facet, and they're part of the whole. I think if our religious leaders and our theologians did the unthinkable and came together in the same room and started comparing commonality of experience and things like that, they could be very helpful to this process. But if we have any group, any major subset of humanity that tries to own this without the rest of us, we can't let that happen. This is for 8 billion people.
That's correct.
Whatever it is. And it's incredibly important that we don't allow it to go that way. So what I see, I'm actually pretty happy with the communications I've had with folks in for lack of a better word, in the religious sphere. The Catholic Church seems ready to talk about this. The Sufis the Sufis have a pretty good idea of they believe of what they're talking about. In general, Jewish tradition will hold this up. So move into the Eastern religions and you know, the larger things surrounding Buddhism and Hinduism, they're ready too. They'll tell you who we're dealing with, like a lot of other folks. So we need to see whatever. I always say that there's this metaphor of us, we're all in a gymnasium, and since we're so polarized in this world right now, I think it fits. You got half the team on this side of the gym and the other team on the other half of the gym, and we're all trying to describe one object that's in the center of the gym, but we're not comparing. I'm not asking what you see over there. I'm telling you what I see from over here. We need that group to come together and kind of start walking around in a circle and seeing the whole thing together, not just sitting in their little comfy spot and telling the rest of us what it is.
Exactly. Very well said. I like the metaphors. It's perfect. So why don't we shift gears and let's talk about 2004 and that whole situation. If you wouldn't mind, you know, I would say that 95% of the people that listen to the show know quite a bit about the whole Tic-Tac Nimitz encounter, but I want to hear it from your perspective, if you'd like to share it with us.
You know, I've told it so many times now that I'm going to tell it but I'm going to tell it a little differently than I have in the past, because we've come so far now since 2004, and we've come so far in the last few years. We wouldn't be here without Kevin Day. If Senior Chief Kevin Day had not been paying attention and had not been a science fiction fan, like they muddied the water with Mr. Moultrie today, he might not have had the wherewithal to say anything. But he was a dedicated Senior Chief Petty Officer. He was an incredibly consummate professional. And there was no way this guy was going to let it go, and he didn't. He faced ridicule on the Princeton, even from his friends. We all gave him hell over this thing. Even the day that they finally sent the video over, the first thing I said to him is, Kevin, what the hell have you got me wasting my time chasing up there on the bridge? And the night before, I'd seen him in the sky myself, you know, and I'd seen him on radar and everything else. And even back then, I was still giving him hell for it. So I just wanted to come out and say to Kevin, I wanted to say thank you so much, because you started the ball rolling on this in a modern fashion. And I don't think we'd be here without him.
I want to say, before you move on with Kevin, just real quickly, because I think it's interesting. I had Robert Powell on a number of years ago, and Kevin Day was watching that night, and he wrote a comment. And before that, he was an unknown about this whole situation. And he wrote a comment, and Robert Powell contacted me and said, he's connected with this guy that wrote a comment, and he looks like he's legit, that he has to do with the Nimitz. And I'm not saying I had anything to do with him coming out, but that's how he got in touch with Robert Powell, and how it kind of went from there. And Kevin's a great guy. He's taken this very emotionally. This has been a real emotional thing for him. And, you know, it kind of pains me to see how that has affected him. But I'm really glad
Yeah.
he's come out and talked about it. And,
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah, and you can move on. I'm sorry, I just wanted to put that.
Oh,
in.
it's
I thought
okay.
it was
It's
kind of an
okay.
interesting tidbit.
Kevin's a great guy. He initiated me as a chief petty officer. He helped mold me into the leader that I became, and this is an emotional subject for a lot of folks. But I don't want to get into that aspect because I can dive down the emotional rabbit hole in a minute and you'll lose me for the rest of the show. So
Okay.
Let me say that so thanks, Kevin, seriously. But beyond that, I want to thank Gary Voorhees, because I'll start telling the story now. But in 2004, I was on board the USS Princeton. I was the chief master at arms. When I first got the call that anything was going on, I was standing watch on the bridge as the conning officer and the junior officer of the deck when Senior Chief Kevin Day called me on the telephone on the bridge and asked me to start moving the ship on certain vectors and certain courses to try to help him calibrate some stuff and figure out this anomaly they had in the system. And I wasn't paying too much attention to it. I just did what he asked. After a while, he asked my lookouts, or called me and said, "Hey, have your lookouts. Keep an eye out on these vectors for any lights in the sky or anything anomalous." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Okay, sure." And as time went by, as the days progressed over this week, he kept calling me more. Then we started talking about it in the Chiefs mess and talking about it on the bridge. And we found out that, Gary Voorhees was running around rebooting radars and pulling tapes and doing all this stuff that I don't understand with his equipment. And as the course of days went by, this got more and more interesting, and Kevin got more and more serious about how he was guiding these efforts. And finally, the night before we saw the video, I'm not sure where in this Commander Fravor was sortied and Commander Dietrich were sortied, because I might have been in my rack at that time. I was working the night shift. But Kevin called me up on the bridge and asked me vehemently to take seriously that my lookouts keep their eyes out. And so I really hadn't been. I'd been really involved in the exercise more. So I went out and told all my lookouts on the sound powered phones and those that I could reach in person that this was serious. And then I started looking too, because I wasn't going to tell them to do it and then go in and drink a cup of coffee. So I grabbed some binos and started looking too. And I was on the port bridge wing. And when I started to scan from the beam up towards the forecastle, and up at about 45 degrees at around 2,000 feet, at least that's the vector that it seemed to be. There were about 5 to 7 lights in the sky. Excuse me, I'm reaching off camera. 5 to 7 lights in the sky, and they were all moving clockwise towards the center of this formation. And one would start moving towards. It was almost like it was going down a funnel. Okay, it would move towards the center and it would disappear, and then the next one would follow in, and they all started moving and they were all gone. And I turned to the lookout next to me, and using saltier language, I said, "Did you see that?" And he said, "Yes, Chief, I did." And we kind of both just stood there looking back and forth for a minute. And then, interestingly enough, I just went into the bridge and kind of looked around, and it was late. Kevin wasn't on watch anymore. We had an exercise to do, so I just got back to work. I know people might say, even other sailors might say, "Why didn't you make a log entry?" It didn't make sense at the time to write in the log 5 to 7 lights in the sky in a circle pattern. And I know a lot of people are gonna say, "But that's your job," and everything else. But we were very stigmatized. Those weren't, whatever those were, I wasn't worried about them. If they were either our aircraft or they were supposed to be there or they were something explainable, I really wasn't taking this idea of UFOs very seriously. That all changed the next morning. I got up in the morning and went out for breakfast, and Kevin was sitting there smiling this huge infectious smile that he had, because he smiles with his whole face. And his partner and compatriot that he worked with sitting next to him was a very gruff, rough SOB, and he was not smiling. And I said to Kevin, what do you got me chasing around up there on the bridge? I was just giving him hell. It was breakfast. I hadn't had my coffee yet. And he's just smiling, just sitting there like this. And the other senior chief said, go check your effing email in the back. Go check the SIPRnet. And I said, all right. So then I have a crowd of about 4 guys around me following me into the chief's lounge, where I logged onto the computer, and just everybody, coffee cup in hand, smiling, can't wait to see my face when I see this. And it was a huge holy crap moment. I immediately knew I was looking at gun cam. I was like, this is a FLIR module. This is okay. I'm checking all the data in the corners. I'm like, what the hell is this? Did we sortie aircraft? What is it? What is that? What am I looking? I knew immediately, just as everybody else, and everybody's nodding like this. This wasn't an aircraft. This was a tube. This was, as we now call it, a Tic-Tac. No wings, no rotors, no jets, no retro rockets, no nothing. And we're taking it all in at once, but we're watching altitude and vectoring and targeting and all of this stuff, and the thing goes, and I immediately turn around. I go, was that the camera, or did that thing zorch out of there like crazy? And Kevin's just smiling. He's like, it took off, bro. It took off. And we're having that kind of conversation in the back. The day progressed. We had another exercise to do, but that evening we had an operations and intelligence briefing scheduled. Not interesting when doing exercises on the ship. Nothing cool in there for the people that get triggered by the word intelligence or secret or stuff like that. Really, the most secret thing we were going to talk about was the weather, and that always makes people laugh because you don't want the enemy to have a better look at the weather than you do. So that's often classified at a low level. But we had our briefing that evening, and it was pretty much status quo, except for the fact that I had been asked to post up at the front door and or keep an eye at the petty officer that was at the front door, because they had a list of people's current clearances and whether somebody had a lapsed clearance or had the wrong clearance. And they just wanted to make sure that if anybody had beef with them or gave them a hard time and said, let me in anyway, that the sheriff would just go take care of it. We didn't have any issues, but that never became a valid point throughout the evening because we didn't address it. When the briefing started, the captain, basically the lieutenant that started, hit the space bar on the old 2004 PowerPoints. Again, these weren't holograms and spaceships in 2004. We didn't even have iPhones back. I think we had just gotten our iPods. But very primitive Mars Attacks type saucer flies across the screen with a little spooky music. And half the room erupts in laughter, and the other half turns and says, what are we laughing at? And, the chatter settles for about 30 seconds, and the captain says, well, we had an interesting week. That was a lot of fun. Let's move on. And that was it.
Wow.
And there was never any discussion about it afterward. We all still had the chain of emails in our inbox. We all still had the video. No one ever said you can't show it, you can't send it, you can't share it. It was on the SIPRnet, so you couldn't take it with you. But we were never cautioned. It just never came up again.
Now, could you send an email out of that SuperNet to another email? To a private email?
Not to a unclassified email. No,
I see.
You can't. It doesn't. The lines don't cross like that. So
I got it.
Would be
Yeah. Wow. So just a couple of things about this whole situation. First of all, when you say you went to breakfast, does that mean you joined him over at the Nimitz?
No, none of us were on the Nimitz.
Oh, I thought Kevin Gay was.
No, we were all on the USS
That's
Princeton.
right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I got it.
The pilots and PJ Hughes were on the Nimitz.
I got it. Right. I just misremembered that. And the video that you looked at, did you see video that we have not seen?
I saw exactly what we have today. People may get confused because I describe it a little bit differently. What they sent over to the USS Princeton was, so there was a longer video than what we got on the Princeton. Mm-hmm. But essentially what we got was a greatest hits spliced together. Every change in modality or anything so here's 3 seconds of it doing this, 3 seconds of it doing that, 3 seconds, any change, they clipped it down to something that we could see and they could squirt over on via the old technology. Because again, kilobytes would take an hour to download.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it was really bad back then. It's nothing. We're so spoiled now. I can't even explain what it was like to leave for 6 months and honestly not communicate with your wife and kids at all. Nowadays, you call them every night from the ship and you're on Facebook with them. So
one of the things I've heard was, and I had someone on this show in particular that told me that he actually saw a clear video, not the FLIR footage So were you aware of that?
So I never heard anything about any other video, any other video the whole time I was on the ship. I didn't hear anything about that until after Lou came out and after we saw the other video. And people have still claimed that. Now, I will say this. The people who have claimed to have seen it in what's called the SES, the Shipboard Signals Exploitation Space. And that was a space that was directly above my office. It was a space that I had never been all the way into, even as the sheriff, since no crime had been committed beyond the black curtain in there. I'd never been past it and didn't need to be. Some folks allege they were hanging out back there. I won't get into the fact that they didn't belong in that space, but they claim that they saw longer videos. And I'm only talking about some specific folks, but they claim that they saw longer, clearer 4K videos. I've not been, when I have asked folks who are in the know, nope, just the gun camera footage. I think people may be misinterpreting the difference between, and I know people are going to think I'm really trying to make an excuse here, but I'm not. There's a big difference between a 450 kilobyte high def for 2004 video shown on a computer from 2004 than there is to a very low def video now in 2022 being shown on a Retina display Macintosh. And your perception of what you're seeing is going to be very different. The television that I watched on black and white televisions and later on tiny color televisions seemed just as vibrant and amazing to me as my 60-inch plasma at the time. So I haven't seen any evidence of a more interesting video from 04. I'd love to see it if it exists. I'm not trying to make that go away or make excuses, but I've never seen or heard anything official that says that there was one.
Yeah. Well, it's still, with all the, like you mentioned earlier, David Fravor and Alex, what's her last name? Dietrich. With their testimony of what they saw, it's just amazing. And I got to say, Commander Fravor was extremely convincing. And every time I've heard him talk about it, because he seems like a no nonsense type of guy. And why, it seems like, for instance, why wouldn't the task force want to talk to him directly, and ask him lots of questions, and along with Dietrich, it seems like that's a firsthand witness right there.
I agree with you. And I think that what we have to look at there, if I'm being kind to the task force is two guys, and then, and a responsibility and a network that they can access. But sorry, I just had a really loud car start outside. What we're also looking at here is, man, I'm sorry, the noise.
Don't even hear it.
House is
Don't
really
even
distracting me. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think that kind of canned my train of thought, as happens sometimes.
All right. I was talking about Dietrich, and yeah.
So what I see is I saw two people get an insane mission, get a limited time to do it. They weren't completely educated up to the point where they needed to be. They did the best they could in a short amount of time. I think that this first hearing and what we've seen, I think they'll get the feedback. I mean, yes. The fact that Representative Burchett immediately turned around and kind of called, raised the BS flag, was like, where are the pilots? Where are the better, et cetera. Now it's up to them. It's up to them to follow on and fix those mistakes. The task force and the leaders that are holding the hearings have an ability to make this right and make it right quickly in a way that's going to gain them a great deal of support.
Right.
I think they would get a groundswell of support from perhaps millions of people if they actually produced something we could work on and gave us a viable timeline for what we can expect. But if they leave us in the dark piecemeal with these ad hoc hearings that they sprinkle throughout the future, I don't see folks just saying okay and going back to work. There's a lot of money tied up in UAP right now. there's a lot of people that have started companies and foundations and
Right.
think tanks and all of this stuff.
It's all exciting. Yeah.
It's very exciting. But the question is who's gonna get the mic? Is a really good question. And are we going to see narratives put forth? And are those narratives going to be narratives we all share and can understand together, or are they just going to be aimed at markets that are going to fill coffers? Because we've seen that already.
Well, I think you're making a very good point here. And why should anyone have a mic in particular?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
if this isn't for all of us, it's not going to be worth it.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want, and unfortunately, a lot of things have to do with money. And if someone could cash in, that would be another thing that would happen. I could see that. I want to go back to your briefing. So you had this briefing, and it was basically made fun of or something. It was how did that make everyone feel, like you and Kevin Day, that actually knew something was going on?
It was really disappointing. Kevin and I disagreed. I mean, I'm saying this not as a memory of a strong memory of us disagreeing, but just saying that in general at the time we disagreed, because I just went, oh, well, that's DARPA or something then. If we didn't care, it must be ours. And Kevin was like, no way, man. I don't think it was. And, he thought it was something different. And I was just as much into it as Kevin was, but I was mad. I was like, we really didn't care. I was like, what I just saw on that gun camera footage looks like it rivals all the stories we heard about Roswell. This should change the world. And everybody just kind of shrugged and went, yeah, probably not. and that was it. I mean, I spent another year and a half on that ship after that.
Really? So here's another question that I've asked people like Kevin Day, and a lot of people I've had that were on the Nimitz have been on the show. And that is, if they were seeing these things happening, and that it went to, and oh God, I can't remember what it's called.
Cap Point.
Yes, it went there, which is a huge mystery how it knew exactly where that was. All this is happening. Why wasn't there more investigation going on to what these things were? It seems to me, wow, this is such a strange technology. I've never understood why the jets weren't constantly sent out to see what the heck is going on. I mean, is it because the training session has to be done just a certain way and no matter what happens? Or
no,
what?
Because we did sortie jets out to it. So the fact that we had a training exercise going on should not have, let me put it this way. If there were 1,000 of them headed towards San Diego, I sure as heck hope we would have said something. But this is where we get back to the stigma. And I want to say this because there's an aspect of gaslighting that goes around the stigma. But I think in a lot of cases here, what people see as purposeful and willful obfuscation by authority, you're dealing in a lot of cases with people's own ability to accept larger ideas. People in leadership, and we see it going back to the 50s and 60s with this subject to a certain extent, their own cultural overlay, their own beliefs define as far as they can take this subject. I always call it taking an easy exit off the freeway. To me, the freeway goes all the way to the point where we can verify one of us shook hands and we can tell where these folks are from now and what they want. Some people get off that freeway early. They say, well, to me, this looks like AI and I think I live in the Matrix. So I'm going to get off the freeway here and I'm going to camp over here and that's what I'm going to talk about and work on. And other people are really interested in consciousness, and other people are interested in purely in extraterrestrials from other physical planets, and other people that are interested in multidimensional ideas and the future and eschatology and all of these things. What if it's all of these things all at once? And that's the most likely truth to it. There's probably some veneer of truth underneath all of the nonsense. How do we own this together? There's so few. We're not in a place yet, and I don't mean to sound negative, but we're not in a place yet where we all agree that we're all human, or that we're all equal, or that we deserve the same equity and equality. And so we're looking to something that we feel is larger to us, and we're looking to others to answer those questions, but we don't face the big questions in our own lives. And in general, I think that keeps people from getting to the end of the rainbow where they need to get with this, where we can make true and real progress, because people are waiting to hear what they want to hear as opposed to what it is.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And, it's, I think, as you just mentioned, I think that's why a number of people were a little bit disappointed. I mean, just from the amount, I don't know how many email I got today. I have to go through them, but it was a lot. and some, I'm sure wish I had time to read them all, but I just haven't yet. But there's probably some really good points in it, because you have all these different eyes looking at what's going on, and everyone has a different take, or everyone's, may see something that someone else didn't. And, which I think is fascinating. And it's been really, very interesting talking to you today. And because of your, inside knowledge of, not inside knowledge, but experience of what happened to you. And I heard you say on this other interview that I listened to that, and I would not be afraid to talk about this at all, that you think it may muddy the waters a little bit to talk about. You've had other experiences in your life, and this is a show about UFOs. You're safe here to talk about it.
I was going to say, I'm not going to let you down on this one, because your show is called Podcast UFO. I mean, come on.
Not UAP,
I saw your intro. I saw your
UAP. Intro. Well, the intro, and by the way, the intro is was made. Someone sent that to me, and I am looking for another intro if anyone does that type of work. So, I mean, I like that one.
A little bit. I've changed my tune a little bit. I used to be really hard on what I called nonsense iconography and things like that. But as we get farther along, I think it's okay, because things like that are okay. I had a friend of mine that was putting together an intro for a video he was doing. He said, "Do you think this is too much?" And I said, as long as we all understand you're not presenting that as fact, as if you're trying to show people a baseline, hey, here's what folks say they look like. This is just the intro to the show. You know what I mean? Like cut them some slack. So I've kind of eased off on that a little bit. I see a change coming down the road for the way that experiencers, I'm not a giant fan of that word, but the way that experiencers and witnesses can come forth and share their stories and be taken seriously and be listened to, and add more information to the observational pool. Because honestly, the first line is, well, what's our takeaway from these experiences? There's a lot of people that are having these experiences and then taking things away. So I want to say, first of all, I think that we're seeing a more mature ecosystem for all of us to come out. But let me get to it, because this is a UFO show and we should talk about UFOs. At the risk of sounding hyperbolic, I've been experiencing what we call a phenomena in one way, shape, or form for most of my life. Whether it was sightings in childhood, being at the 2004 Tic-Tac event, and things that have happened since then, it's been a wide spectrum of things. I've experienced the negative. I've experienced things that seemed overwhelmingly positive, and things that seemed like it didn't even know I existed. I had a black triangle incident here in San Diego, here at my home. It was at least 2,000 feet across. Wow. It was moving incredibly slow. It had no lights, and I could hear the wind whistling over it. And then I watched it go overhead and tip on its side and move away at a velocity that was absolutely ridiculous. And I have to tell you that I live a mile north of a helicopter base, 3 miles south of SOCOM, 6 miles away from the Fleet Concentration Center, and I'm surrounded by 5 airports, 3 of them international. I'm in one of the biggest flight corridors in the world, and I've got 3 of them that come over my house. So every type of aircraft you can think of, I've seen it. I've guarded a B-2. I've stood under them when they're flying at low altitude and landing. I know exactly what they look like and sound like. This was not a conventional aircraft. Whatever it was, it didn't work normal. As far as lights in the sky and anomalous events, even in and around the house and the family, we've experienced those things too.
Now, is this all in the San Diego area where you live?
Yeah, I've been here since 1998.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so the majority of those things, well, no, I wouldn't say the majority of them were the triangle, the Tic-Tac, and most of the things I've seen in the last 20 years or so were here. Others were in Northern California, around San Francisco, and in Florida. It's very confusing to me because, and I know this surprises a lot of people when they find out, but I've been seeing this stuff my whole life and I don't know what it is. And that's why I'm not so heavy on turning to the government going, tell us what this is, because I think you can keep seeing it and not know what it is. And so when there's people in the community that come to me and they want to tell me that they're from here, here's their message, here's their mission, they get real specific with it. I'm not having that experience. I have never met an alien that I can say, or spoken to one. Now I have really interesting memories of events, but for me, those events are always punctuated by a sleep period. So I personally don't take them always as an experience. I'm still not exactly sure what I'm looking at. And I mean, since we already went there with the Marvel Universe stuff, the Doctor Strange flick just came out. Could I be dreaming another Sean who's cooler somewhere else? Maybe. And I have to accept that. I don't know that I was away with the aliens last night doing cool stuff. That might have been a different me somewhere, and I still got to get up in the morning, do the dishes, and clean up the dog mess. So I really don't know. And I'm not discounting anybody else's experience. Somebody who wakes up and has physical marks and has trauma and things like that. I'm just saying that's not my experience. So I know there's something going on. I even went to therapy after I retired. I had a hard time taking my uniform off. There was I left something in that uniform, and it was my courage and my wherewithal and my get up and go, and I had to figure that out. But that happened in the middle of me meeting Lou and getting involved with this. And so I was lucky enough to have an open-minded therapist who was kind of a hippie, but she helped me through all this. And she's like, is it, how much does it bother you? How much does it scare you? And she helped me realize that you're having a really interesting experience. And if it's not driving you batty, enjoy it. And I decided at that point not to let it drive me batty anymore. I decided not to be scared of it anymore. For a while there, it's going to sound silly as a guy who was a cop, but I was walking around with at least a pocket knife for a while. And my wife asked me one day, she's like, who are you going to stab? A little gray dude? Is that like, what are you going to do? And I was like, you're right. What am I doing here? I'm just afraid. And people are going to probably want me to talk about this more, but when I stopped being afraid, scary stuff stopped happening. So what do you do with that? I know we all have, of course, I could talk for an hour with you on a different show about frequency and vibration and meditation and fear and all that stuff. But since we're being kind of, general in this and on a day that was very pragmatic, I don't want to go too into the weird, but there's a lot to this. It's not just vehicles in the sky from somewhere else with cool dudes in it. There's aspects of psychotronics. There's aspects of non-linguistic programming. There's aspects of control around this subject that are frightening. And no, those aren't ready for the hill today. You don't start with those, but we're going to have to get there someday.
Have you ever, this is fascinating. Have you ever looked into or heard about the Ariel school incident?
I have. I have actually kind of kept the Ariel incident over here as if it's a prize that I don't want to know everything about because I enjoy it so much. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you really dig into it and it loses its gloss. It's still something I want to know more about that. I want to hear more from the witnesses.
Well, the Ariel phenomenon is coming out May 20th. It's on my website, and I got to watch the screener on it, and it is my favorite movie on this topic.
Really?
It's really good because it shows John Mack did a wonderful job interviewing these children. Really wonderful job. He was stellar at what he did and got so much information out of them at the right time. And then it follows them 20 years later when they're in their 20s and how it impacted their life. And it's really moving. It's really a great video. I suggest anyone listening to this, you got to watch that movie. That's incredible. And what I was getting at when I first brought it up was, there's talk about telepathic. You talked about nonverbal communication or something like that. And I think that's kind of what you meant, which is all fascinating. And I remember asking Emily Trim, who was one of the people in that, what was it like? What was it like for her? And she said it was like sending a neuro link, like she could see like pictures, that type of thing. And that's how she got the communication, which wasn't all that good because it was about we're destroying our planet, not exactly how to do anything to fix it, but just the fact that we are. And this was 1994. Yeah, we're still doing it.
I find it fascinating because I think there's something about the phenomenon, especially in these more famous or impactful or perhaps understandable cases, the ones where we can at least see something we think we recognize. There's a lot of personal choice, it seems to be. And I have to say that I've had people try to paint my experience in OFO because of who I am now, because of the way that I present myself. They make an assumption that I had a spiritual awakening in 2004, and I didn't. This step, the Tic-Tac stepped on the air supply of my spirituality. Me seeing it as a possible government program or DARPA or our tech, and the way we reacted kind of popped my mystical bubble at the time, and I had it. I was done. I wasn't going to wonder and dream and look up and think anymore. And in fact, being completely honest, my daughter suffered over the years because that was during the Harry Potter craze, and I was like, Harry Potter's nonsense. There's no magic. I'm really sad about it looking back because I told her, I said, I feel like I stole something from your childhood by not being there with you for that stuff.
And what made you more or less bitter about it? Was the fact that it was like being made little of?
I've learned about myself over the years that I don't like being told we're having ice cream after dinner and then we're having pie. I get really angry. I'm not happy with the pie. I want the thing you said that I was going to have. And so I know that looking back, I think what happened was I got my hopes up really, really big, and then nothing happened. And so I took my ball and went home. In a lot of ways. And that almost killed me. I mean, that paradigm shift in my thinking led to my heart attack at 37 a few years later.
Oh, geez.
And that material look at I became a materialist very quickly. And it was bad. It was bad news. Since then, no, I'm in my private life. I'm the woo-woo guy over in the corner. I'm the hippie wearing probably only a pair of shorts or a sarong or something like that. But this is the most fascinating subject and spectrum of ideas that I've encountered in my entire life. Yes. And I feel very fortunate to have had almost every flavor of it so far up until this point. And I don't know that if I could be here with my thoughts and feelings, etc., as I am, if not for having experienced the bad and the good.
Yeah. You gotta experience it all to understand the polar opposites, really. Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, this has been, we only have a couple minutes left, but you're an amazing guest. And I just want to say that if you want to come on every week, you're welcome. It's been really, really fantastic.
You're really easy to talk to. You ask really good questions. I love watching your show. I couldn't commit to every week, but I would love to come back and talk to you again. Most definitely. It was really a pleasure to speak to you.
Great. And so where do you think, like I said, we got about 3 minutes. So
yeah,
where do you think, what do you think you're going to be doing in the future when it comes to this topic?
Well, we decided to dissolve the LLC of our business. We had considered for a period of time entering into the business portion of this, because let's be real, you can only get so far, being pro bono.
Mm-hmm.
But with the dissolving of the business, I've decided that I'm just going to kind of wing it. I've got a few irons in the fire, as people like to say, as far as helping communicate this subject in a different manner. I've been approached by after a couple of years there have been some offers come in that look like they would be very helpful to the community, not just helpful to me and my family.
May I make a suggestion?
Tough. Yes,
I would love to make a suggestion to you. Are you familiar with Stanton Friedman?
I am. Yes.
Now, Stanton Friedman went around all these colleges and places like that and spoke about this topic. I think you would be perfect at that.
Thank you very much.
And I just think you would, the way you present yourself, your authenticity, the whole deal, it would really be great. But
thank you.
And someone just wrote, "Thank you for your service." Yes, thank you.
That was my pleasure. And I appreciate it when people thank me for that, but I volunteered each time, and it was my pleasure to serve alongside the folks that I did. So it was not a sacrifice it was a sacrifice for my family, but for me, it was a pleasure for 20 years.
Wow. Sean, where can someone reach you? Do you want people to reach you?
That's a tough question. I've never been in demand in my life unless I was in trouble. And so at this moment, I'm on about a 3-day turnaround to even answer friends and family, because I'm so overwhelmed. But I do want people to reach out. They can find me at mintyhyperspace.com. I have some of my older interviews archived there, some articles and other things. But they can write me directly at mintyhyperspace@gmail.com. And that's 2 words, Minty and hyperspace, in case I muddled it up. But I would love for people to reach out to me. If I'm slow turning around, I try to answer everybody. I don't get to. But it's been incredible the last 3 years. The amount of support that we've gotten has been incredibly overwhelming. I've never seen this much selflessness and support in any way in my life. And between you and me, we may spend time complaining about the trolls and those who want to, jump from detail to detail, hoping to make a name for themselves. But the fact is the community has been overwhelmingly supportive. And I have not been able to find a way to say thanks properly for the amount of support we've got.
Well, you just did tonight. So thank you so much, Sean. It's been my absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Martin. It was very mutual.
All right. Take care. All right, everyone. So we'll be back next week with Mario Woods. And I think he had to do with Rendlesham Forest. Thank you so much for staying tuned tonight. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.